All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, Femi Boyede, a certified international trade practitioner, is joining me right now from Canada. We will be concluding our interview session from yesterday. Mr. Boyede, good morning to you. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
We're doing well. We're doing well. Now,
Thank you.
now let's
Good
continue.
morning, Nigeria.
Yes, let's continue our conversation yesterday. We had a lot to discuss yesterday. In fact, we had about close to 45 or 50 minutes of talk on the non-oil sector. You took our viewers on a ride in terms of perhaps even the requirements, what we need to do, even the trade policy. We had a chat about it yesterday. But I want us to concentrate on perhaps the how-to today of some of the things we talked about yesterday. So let me just allow you for 2 minutes to take me on a ride. I don't want to lead you. You lead me right now. Just 2 minutes. I'm giving you the baton. So let's take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Yesterday, just like you said, I think we were just having an overview and crying over what could be. I don't want to say what could have been because it's not yet lost. We are happy with, thank God that COVID and fall in oil prices around the world have actually driven home the point that now is the time more than ever before that we need to do something about developing our non-oil exports. And please note that I say non-oil exports. I'm not saying non-oil sectors. When we say non-oil exports, we get misled into thinking that tax, which of course is very, very necessary. The country I live in probably rakes in a good percentage of its annual economy from taxes, but also what we call the real sector, which includes the manufacturing and non-manufacturing non-oil export sector is what I want to talk about. We did talk about the things, the potential, and we talked about what is lacking, which is actually a harmonized strategy that could drive us into a world player in export. I must warn or emphasize rather that the global market is an economic battlefield. It's actually a war front where competitiveness is the only enabler that can keep you and sustain you in this market. And this is the reason why the how to, like you mentioned, is a welcome topic for me. What should we be doing? Yesterday, I think our viewers were excited by the illustration of just how easy it is to increase Nigeria's exports using global supermarket chains as distribution outlets. But that was just a tip of the iceberg. I think that the more we go into it, the more I can explain to you that Nigeria does stand a chance, a very big one at that matter. If we were to concentrate, for example, our market development efforts on opening up outlets in the niche areas. If you look at services, what WTO statistics tell us that services in 2018-2019 actually accounted for a whopping 5.6 trillion US dollars. And this is a sector where Nigeria does stand not only comparative but competitive advantages. As against trade in goods, services actually a little bit easier to package and present and then to play a role in. So even for our trade negotiators, I think, thank God we are blessed with very good hands in the areas of services and negotiations in Nigeria. I think this is an area that we should be looking at, but I'm talking more about simply handicrafts, for example. I don't hear people talking about handicraft. Global trade in handicrafts is about 150 billion US dollars every year. And if you have come to the other side of the world, then you'll understand just how huge this market is. Handicrafts is not only the Benin bronze heads. Handicrafts is the little things that women go to the market to pick between spring and summer. Of course, you understand everybody wants their houses dressed, even the flower vases that our women have so much confidence, competence in. Their God-given talents and all of this. I don't see anybody developing Nigeria's handicraft sector for export. And like I said, it's about 150 billion US dollar market every year. The 5.6 trillion trade in commercial services that I'm talking about includes things like legal services, like accounting services, like professional management consulting services. And of course, you understand that the ones that we have in Nigeria, they're very big professionals. I think at one point, I don't know whether it was in Lagos, Nancy, that I was asking you the question off the cuff. How much do Nigerian players, football players, we call it soccer here in North America, how much do Nigerian soccer players actually earn per annum? If that was factored, because these are services that Nigeria has exported, it's their talents that have taken them abroad. If this were factored, for example, as part of Nigeria's trade performance, do you understand that we will be needing to rebase again the Nigerian economy and stuff like that? So these are the areas that I think we should be looking at. Let's take, I'm talking about niche markets. Let's look at developing Nigerian manufacturers, for example, Nigerian exporters, whether they're manufacturers or not, to actually be competent and then begin to participate in emergency relief sourcing. Okay. Look at how big the market is in emergency relief materials. We're talking about blankets, we're talking about basic food. And I'm not only here, I see Nigerian entrepreneurs, SMEs, micro companies packaging gari with the appropriate quantity of sugar and peanuts, and then this thing that is ready to just put into the water. So imagine, for example, even on the African continent, where we have natural disasters, and they have to go and look for all of these international donations. So if we had a sectoral approach to export development that actually I don't know, Obama said America will double its trade to the world in the next 5 years. America will create 5 million jobs through this renewed efforts to double America's export to the world. Do we have a mandate that is measurable? Do we have a responsibility thrust on somebody or some people's or on a group's shoulder that says, okay, in view of the opportunities that have been exposed to us now as the COVID emergency imposed international market, Nigeria will earn, I don't know, $100 billion from new export outlets within the next 2 years. And then this then begins to allow you to create, to be creative in your thinking as to how this can be achieved.
Okay.
I think that we have moved, the world has moved much, much further than I sponsored 50 companies to participate in international trade fairs last year. That is no longer a measurable performance indicator. That is, as far as I'm concerned, that is.
So what will be the measurable indicator beyond taking 50 or 100 companies abroad going on road shows and trade fair?
Well, what is the performance of the, first I would want to know how much have we spent on trade fair attendance in the past 10 years? Then I would like to know how much have these companies actually contributed to Nigeria's export growth. Starting from there, you can actually also allocate a performance index for trade fair participation. Is it on-the-spot sales? Are these reported? Or is it the orders that were secured? Were they executed? So from there, you can then begin to say, why were they not executed? I want to, through trade fairs, generate 10 billion, well, a good starting point, 10 billion US dollars as a new addition to Nigeria's export performance through trade fairs. Therefore, I want to put in place post-attendance strategies that helps these companies to actually execute the orders that they secured. I remember way back in 1992, I think it was 1992, when we had this solo exhibition in Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. And as at that time, the Ghanaian government was ready to enter into a 5-year, I think, 5 or 6 year deal with Nokaco. Nokaco is Northern Cable and Wire Manufacturing. I don't know if they're still there in Kaduna, because then and even now, Nigerian electrical cable wires were rated as the best in the world. So for the infrastructure expansion plan of Ghana at that time, they were ready to enter into this agreement that enables them to source all the electrical cables from Nokaco. But I'm not sure that Nokaco ever exported $10 worth of electrical wire. So let me not take too much of the time on trade fairs. But I just wanted to start on that to let you know that we can also set performance indicators from trade fairs as a contributor. I'm looking at the possibility, for example, of charging Nigeria with, I started with emergency relief. There is the United Nations Central Sourcing and Procurement arrangement. This is another market that does well over 500 billion US dollars every year. So rather than the small and medium entrepreneurs in Nigeria struggling, needing to break their necks on where will my product go into next time. Is it possible for us to begin to develop? Let us say that in 2021, we want to develop 100 new exporters from Nigeria. Of these 100 new exporters, 20 are going to specifically do international competitive bidding in the areas of developing acceptable standard products that have the standards that are acceptable for United Nations central procurement, such that you have a guaranteed purchase order. Say, for example, Everwater. Nigeria cannot export Everwater to America, but Nigeria can export Everwater to the other countries. There is no country that is small, so I don't want to belittle anybody, any nation, but there are places that our manufactured products still hold higher, competitive advantage. So if you take each of these sectors, I mentioned handicraft this morning. Why is it that it is China and India that I talked about 5.6 trillion trade? China and India between them account for about 37% of this trade. So what portion can Nigeria take advantage of? You are in Abuja. Have you ever driven to Gwagwalada from the center of Abuja? There's a village there. Unfortunately, I think they're going into extinction now, Giri. What Giri has always been known for is clay pots. Clay pots don't need any machine. In fact, if you go to the other side of Abuja, you go to a village called Ushafa, there's also another pottery operation that is out there. Mark my word now, every new visitor to Julius Berger in Abuja, I'm using this very ready example so you can relate with it. Every German visitor to Julius Berger ends up in Ushafa or Giri to procure clay handicraft products that they take out of Nigeria every time that they come. These are trades in Europe where the things end up that are running into hundreds of billions of dollars. If we had a target, if we had a focus on these women and say, okay, we now want Nigeria's pottery and clay products to begin to also compete for a share of world market in handicraft, then we will design a strategy that enables these women to play. I also remember in this one, it's not a matter of pictorial illustration alone. There is a company, I hope they are still in existence, called Dajo, D-A-J-O Pottery in Makurdi in Benue State. Dajo Pottery, for almost 4 years consecutively, was winning gold medal in ceramics product. Ceramics is also from clay. For in Germany, I think at one point in Osaka, in Japan and stuff, 4 consecutive years, I remember, Dajo Pottery was winning laurels. Where is Dajo today? So we have export opportunities spread all over the world. Is it possible for us to zero in, sectorize them, and give each of these sectors an achievable target?
Okay.
That says, okay, from handicraft, we're going to aspire to earn X amount of dollars. From participating in the emergency relief procurement market, we aim to earn such and such. From this or that, then the government, so I'm now going to go to incentives.
Okay, I was actually coming to that. Mr. Bayede, I was actually coming to the incentives because I actually gave you time so that you can enumerate the how-tos. And for perhaps...
So now you know that you should never give me time.
I shouldn't put you... You know, I intentionally did that so that you can, and our viewers can really understand the potentials of what we're talking about. I was actually also coming to incentives. And when I thought of incentives, what came to my mind too, incentives from government especially. What also came to my mind is the EEG, the Export Expansion Grant that was suspended, I think, in 2013. The President Buhari, reopened it, I think, in 2017. Inserted, I think, a 20 billion naira EEG there. So are you looking at those kind of incentives? Because we know what happened to the EEG, why it was suspended, because, you know, perceived beneficiaries did not, you know. So what kind of incentives are you looking at? And this is also quite interesting that our viewers, especially those that are involved in this, I like that you broke everything down for things that we're doing in the country has export potential. So we need to begin to see that. As you answered that also, you made mention that there's a difference between non-oil and non-oil exports. What's the difference?
Well, non-oil sectors, the usual the concentration when they mention non-oil sectors in Nigeria, number 1 right now is tax. Okay. Maybe number 2 is revenue from customs. And again, that bleeds my heart because as long as you make customs, let me just spend 1 minute to talk about that. As long as you make revenue from customs as important as it is today, as long as you give the customs a revenue target, Nigeria is going to remain a dumping ground for manufactured products from other countries. You don't need a soothsayer to tell you this.
I like that you brought up that, Mr. Boyede. Hold on. I like that you brought up that because during the CBN roundtable, I think in January or was it early February, Aliko Dangote did say that the kind of concentration and the kind of attention we give to custom generates also revenue, that it's not right. The custom is supposed to be a trade facilitator.
Facilitator. So God bless him.
So that's
where I'm coming. Yeah. That's where I'm coming to. The highest import duty, I believe, right now under the CET, Common External Tariff that Nigeria is a signatory to, the highest import duty on raw materials and machinery, I believe, is 5%. And depending on whether you apply properly to the Ministry of Finance, you can actually, as a bona fide manufacturer or assembler, it's also an industrial incentive in Nigeria that is operational right now. Ministry of Finance will actually enable you to bring this in at 2.5% import duty if they are critical machinery and equipment. But for every finished product, including toothpick, so it is not enough for us to be complaining that we are importing toothpick. For every finished product, the minimum import duty is 10%. Minimum. There are some champagnes, for example, not only attract, like, I can't remember whether it is 150% or stuff, but there is also a development levy that is added on top. And even at that, people are importing it. There is more red wine consumed in Nigeria annually than France, the origin or the world capital of red wine, than France produces in 3 years. So they also have to supplement Nigeria's consumption of red wine from Spain, from Chile, and these days now from South Africa. Yeah, so all of these are the things that bring revenue to the customs service. So if customs must achieve its target as given by the federal government, customs will encourage the importation of these things rather than them being produced locally. Because if you were to bring fruit juice, let me not even use the alcoholic beverages, fruit juices, pineapple concentrates and what have you that are repacked in Nigeria, you are probably bringing them in at an incentive rate of about 2.5%, maximum 5% import duty to come and produce them in Nigeria. But if they are produced abroad and brought in, customs can charge you 25%. So if customs is a revenue-driven agency, it goes without saying that customs joy will be for import of finished products to continue to increase. And so we are going to continue to be a dumping ground. So it's not enough for us to go to international negotiations and start shouting, oh, Nigeria cannot be a dumping ground. Then we come back home and call Ahmed Ali and say, hey, the revenue of 19 billion you reported last year is not enough. Government expects this from you. Sorry, Nancy, we were supposed to be talking about incentives. Let's come back. Yes. The export expansion grant has remained the only one incentive that is working in Nigeria. For the kind of approach that I'm talking about, we cannot have a one-cap-fits-all kind of incentive. Sectoral promotion requires sectoral. It's just like the human body. You want to heal the human body, you cannot apply Panadol, for example, to somebody who is crying of stomach ache. It is not Panadol that he's supposed to take. But even the export expansion grant, at the level it is right now, it's more like a, I don't know, a Greek gift. It is not an incentive in Nigeria as of today. Do you know the reason why? In the 2018, I think 2017 budget, that was a 2018 budget that was supposed to address 2017 exports, $20 billion was put in there for settlement of export expansion grant. I need to
20 billion
explain naira. I need to explain to you and to your viewers that 20 billion naira is what one single company will earn as export expansion grant if they are actually performing in the international market. One company. As of today, I think there are about 347 companies that are qualified to access export expansion grant in Nigeria. Where does 20 billion naira go? When you keep a cap on export expansion grant, it means that you are saying Nigerian companies do not exceed certain amount of export because you will not get, if you exceed, you are just doing it for yourself. You know, you won't have enough this in bed. Even of that 20 billion, NEPC can tell you, with figures, I don't think that they got about up to 50% of it. Okay. So at the time that Nigeria opted for non-oil exports as an economic strategy in 1986, 18 different incentives were put on the act. There is the, I think, Export Incentive and Miscellaneous Act number 65, I think it is. I can't remember which one, what the number was. But in the Export Incentives and Miscellaneous Act, there are 18 different incentives, including export price adjustment scheme. So if you have an export price adjustment scheme, the current fall in the world market price of cocoa will not deter Nigerian exporters from exporting.
Okay, Mr. Aboyede.
Let me quickly finish the story, Nancy. 38 companies were randomly selected among those federal government was owing EEG. Till today, nobody is talking. Everybody has gone quiet. 38 companies were selected and omitted out of those. Government still owes them the EEG. Government has not paid. Nobody is talking about it. So where does that become an incentive? I don't want to advocate, to go a looter on that. When you finish, Nancy, if we still have time, I would then want to explain the kind of incentives that each of the sectoral promotions I'm talking about.
That actually is my last question, and I'll allow you land in 2 minutes because I have 2 minutes left with you. So, yes, quickly enumerate that. I have another segment. 2 minutes. What kind of incentives?
So, we're talking about export. Now we need to talk about the Export Development Fund. The Export Development Fund, I understand that Barrister Segun Awolowo actually took a paper to government on that. That is a place that's a fund that needs to be endowed right now, because that is the fund that allows for each of those sectors that I've mentioned earlier, especially handicrafts, where you have massive illiterates participating. If you are going to develop Nigeria's handicraft for export, you are going to have to concentrate on developing the talent to international standard. You are going to teach those women the kind of finishing. You are going to need to pay money to purchase annual trends in handicraft development. What is the pot shape going to look like next summer? What kind of flower vases are people going to use? What kind of what do you call it, sitting room or living room decorations are people looking at? You need to have a fund that provides for that. You need to have a fund concentrated on market access development. And unfortunately, the best of it all is the one that we don't have the time to talk about, maybe sometime in future. But as far as I know, Britain colonized Nigeria economically by bringing in John Holt. So yesterday I talked about making Nigeria an industrial outpost. The other concept that is actually working, blowing my mind right now, is whether it is possible for Nigeria to begin to imagine which countries they can conquer by actual capture and colonize economically by actually going to establish Nigerian John Holts in those countries. That is another export development strategy that now.
So you're talking about perhaps economic diplomacy, because foreign policy also has, foreign policy has a bit of what kind of foreign policy are we practicing or are we doing? For example, we are the largest market in West Africa. What other West African countries can we definitely have our imprints, for example? But I just like they said, some of those smaller countries are intimidated already by Nigeria. So, but it takes economic diplomacy to be able to achieve all of that. Mr. Boyede, I think that's the much we can take. We'll leave it at that today. I hope that we've been able to, you know, look at this topic, the non-oil export sector, at least from yesterday to today. For those that saw the program yesterday, and perhaps our concluding part, is not a program that will definitely finish in like 2 days or so, because there are so many things that we need to talk about. But I thank you for your perspectives, and I thank you for the insights which you've given to us. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyede, for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy.